Okay, so now we have dealt with the first stage of recovery, and you had the EFT sequences that worked with balancing that energy. And again, that's the whole task of stage 1 recovery. Stage 2 recovery is when we begin to look at the underlying causes of that stress. And it takes us right into the inner child work. So what we're going to start now in this series is, over the next 7 videos, we're going to talk about the 7 developmental stages. The infant, toddler, 3 to 6-year-old, 6 to 12, the adolescent stages, which I divide into 3 areas. Each one of those had a set of tasks that needed to be mastered. And when those were not mastered, then we continued in our development, but our foundation was faulty. And so by the time we got into adulthood, if we made it into adulthood without addictively acting out, by the time we make it into adulthood, we are building our adult life on that faulty foundation. And so, as I said earlier, we're going to look at the codependent bargain and the cherished saboteur through the eyes of each of those developmental stages. And that will help you begin to identify where some of your vulnerable places are, where some of your challenges are. And each one of them has an EFT sequence. Now again, I'm going to post a lot more information with checkoff sheets and ways for you to begin to identify these different ages within you. Before we go on, I want to emphasize the inner child is simply a way for us to give the feelings that you experienced in childhood a name and a face. These are not different personalities. By working with these different aspects of yourself, you are not suffering from multiple personality. It's kind of based on the old Gestalt model, where we deal with all the parts and we begin to get all the parts integrated. And it's based on transactional analysis. Now, what motivated me to go in this direction with my model is I imagine all of my family therapy background. I was trained as a family systems therapist, so I think in systems. And I just started applying that same systemic model to my inner family. So the way I operate in my life is, when I'm distressed, the first thing I do is I try to locate it in my body, and then I ask, who inside is feeling this discomfort? And what do you need from me? Now sometimes I get a very specific age, sometimes I just get a feeling. Don't be alarmed with how you get the information. If you get stuck, then a really nice way to work with the inner child is to use the least dominant hand. Now I'm left-handed, so if I can't quite get to it, I override my rational mind by writing with my right hand. What that does is my rational mind is so focused on constructing the letters that the subconscious and the content of what I'm writing passes right through. So I really am not aware of what I've written until I step back and I look at it. So that's one of the ways you can get to it. Again, the Inner Child Workbook. You know, God loved that book. I wrote that in '91, and it's been out there for, 19 years. It is still on the bookshelves of Barnes & Noble. I can still go in to any Barnes & Noble, and I do. My little kid loves to go see if our book is still on sale. But it's in the 36th printing. And I'm telling you, it's like this child that just took off on its own, and it just keeps gifting back to me. I think why it was really successful is 2 reasons. One is that it's very comprehensive. But 2 is that it's really the first endeavor I ever did where my commitment was that I did not want to write one word of that book without being in alignment with my higher self. And how I structured that was that I would get up every morning at 4 o'clock. That's when I started getting up so early. And from 4:30 to 8:30, I used that time to write. Now some days I was so out of sync that I didn't write one word. I just spent my time in meditation, in doing my own inner child work. And then the next day, I would come in, and once I was clear and connected, then I would write from that place. So I think that book was just a book that was meant to be written, and that by getting out of my own way every day, I managed to bring that through. The other reason I think it was successful is that there was a certain point where I felt really just bombarded by ideas. And I knew I was not going to be able to regulate it. And at that point in time, this was like in 89 was when I wrote it, 89 and 90. A lot was going on in my life, a breakup in a relationship. My father had just died in 88. And so there was a lot of personal issues going on too. But I remember one particular day, and I know I'm digressing a little bit in the last couple of videos just to talking to you, but I want to fill in the gaps a little bit. And if we were in a live workshop, I'd probably be doing this. But you know, what happened that day was that I just felt barraged. And I thought, you know, I'm not going to make this. If I don't figure out some way to manage this, then I'm not going to. And I was angry. And I was angry at my, I was angry at my higher self. And I remember just stopping. And I was out jogging at the time. And I just stopped and I said, you know, if you want me to do this, then we have to strike a balance. Because I'm tired of revering you, my higher self, more than I revere my human self. And you're downloading this information so quickly that you're overamping me. And I'm going to implode and I'm not going to get anything done. So we have to strike a balance. If I'm going to bring through what you want me to bring through and do your work, you have to slow it down and go at a pace that my human self can absorb it. And you know, there was such a turnaround then, because it was the first time that I really demanded equal time with the human self and the higher self. And actually, I have a video that I'm going to do for you in terms of balancing that. Balancing the masculine and feminine, and balancing the higher self and the human self. But I'm going to save those for the third stage of recovery. I want to deal first with the inner child and take you through that process. And then we'll talk about the promise of what comes after that when you heal the inner child. Just to preview, basically it's when you get to begin to deal with your value system and get on board with designing the life of your choice and doing all of the law of attractions material. Or as I like to call it, if I haven't done my inner child work, the law of distractions. So if your inner children and your childhood issues didn't get you by the way of your addictions, then often it appears in your sabotage of trying to implement the laws of attractions. So before the 62 days is over, we will deal with all of this. Enough talk for today. I will bring you the next EFT video, either today or I'll save it for tomorrow. But the process begins or continues. Thanks.